Ah, the cruel irony of consciousness is the most profound torture, not the absolute blindness of the void, but the agonizing, persistent clarity of unwelcome sight. Vega terna, not in the cheerful light of a comforting dawn, but beneath the oppressive, violet penumbra of undeniable truth. The world, in its ceaseless, frantic dance towards some illusory happiness, operates fundamentally upon the principles of interment. It is a vast, sophisticated sepulchre, where all discomforting knowledge, all the ragged edges of reality, the failures of the human spirit, the grotesque machinery of existence are methodically And what is the fate of the soul burdened, cursed even, with the ability to see these restless ghosts stirring beneath the polished marble? It is a fate defined by exquisite, solitary pain. We speak today of the pain of seeing what the world tries to bury. This is not merely about secrets whispered in shadow. It is about the structural, insidious foundation of denial upon which civilization erects its temporary, gaudy towers. For the multitude, ignorance is a soft, comforting blanqueta, necessary anesthetic against the cold, implacable indifference of the cosmos. They prefer the cheerful, manufactured narrative. They cherish the comforting lie. They are sustained by the exclusion of decay, the congenial mission of history's cyclical cannibalism, and the absolute refusal to recognize the inherent, beautiful fragility of their own sanity. But you, the spectator who chooses this spectral theater, you harbor an appetite for the profound, the uncomfortable, the truth that peels the skin from the bones of illusion. And I, your somber guide, the one who has long walked these echoing galleries of despair, I promise you no solace, only the chilling camaraderie of recognition. The initial tremor of this specific pain begins the moment the observant eye recognizes that what is universally accepted is not necessarily true. It is the shock of realizing that the crowd is not running toward illumination, but fleeing the darkness within themselves, projecting their terror onto the nearest convenient phantom. The burden is immediate, the realization that your vision places you utterly and eternally outside the circle of warmth. You become the alien observer, capable of charting the fault lines in the earth before the earthquake, yet incapable of warning those who refuse to hear the tremor because it disrupts their afternoon tea. This pain, subtle at first, later calcifies into the relentless weight of solitude. You see the motivation behind the mask of kindness. You detect the corrosive vanity fueling the grandest philanthropic gesture. You understand the quiet, ceaseless terror that drives mankind to build monuments only to tear them down. This very truth is not held in ancient texts or forgotten crypts. It is woven into the very fabric of every interaction, every smile, every newspaper headline. It is the silent, pervasive scream of reality being muffled by human aspiration. Tonight, we will exhume these heavy truths. We will explore the specific agony of clarity, the pain of the esthetician who sees the inherent decay in all beauty, the historian who understands that progress is merely the arrangement of the next catastrophe, and the lover who knows that even the most fervent embrace is but a temporary against the inevitable encroachment of dissolution. Prepare your minds, for we are descending past the shallow graves of common knowledge and into the deep, damp earth where the genuine, horrifying splendor of what truly is lies waiting. The subtle tremor we felt in the introduction rapidly escalates into the dizzying pool of the abyss. This is the descent into the maelstrom of unwelcome knowledge, a terrifying, swirling vortex, where every comforting pillar of societal architecture is revealed to be built upon the shifting sand of deliberate. The pain of seeing what is buried is not merely an intellectual exercise. It is the physical sensation of having the air sucked from your lungs by the sheer weight of universal denial. Consider the intricate, terrifying mechanics of interment. What precisely does the world endeavor to bury? It is, first and foremost, inconvenient human nature. The populace, desperate for the flattering mirror of morality, expends titanic energy suppressing the baser, more magnificent darkness within the heart. They seek to enter the truth of their own motivations. The envy veiled as critique, the profound existential terror masked by relentless productivity, the deep-seated desire for destruction that is often the twin sibling of the will to create. The perceptive soul, the one cursed with sight watches. This elaborate, societal funeral procession of authentic emotion, recognizing that the coffin contains not a stranger, but a vital, frightening part of themselves and everyone they meet. This constant witnessing of psychological suppression leads to a specific form of agonizing clarity. You begin to understand that the veneer of civilization is agonizingly thin, a fragile membrane stretched over a raging chaos. The observer is forced to live in two realities simultaneously: the brightly lit, banal accepted world of superficial interaction, and the shadow realm of raw, an edited, terrifying truth. Every polite conversation becomes a veiled negotiation of buried resentments. Every public display of virtue, a monumental act of hypocrisy. To see this is to be eternally afflicted with the knowledge of imminent collapse, much like standing on a magnificent bridge knowing that a crucial, hidden support beam is corroded to dust. The most acute phase of this descent involves the realization that this widespread blindness is necessary for the continuation of the human drama. If the full spectrum of reality, the ceaseless cycle of decomposition, the utter futility of many human endeavors in the face of temporal scale, the arbitrary nature of suffering were fully absorbed by every individual, the machinery of commerce, politics, and romance would grind to a shrieking halt. Therefore, the vision must be obstructed. Society administers an opiate of superficiality, a continuous feed of distraction that acts as a cognitive din. The pain din is compounded by the seer holds the terrible diagnosis, but lacks the authority, or even the language, to communicate the terminal nature of the illness to the patient who insists they are merely suffering from a common cold. This isolation is absolute. You are trapped with a vision of sublime horror, unable to retreat into the comforting fog of collective delusion, yet unable to forge a genuine connection with those who actively flee the very darkness you inhabit. The solitude is not chosen. It is thrust upon you by the very act of observation. It is the curse of Cassandra, amplified by the modern world's relentless pursuit of engineered bliss. We are now truly deep, suspended in the chill currents of this unwelcome awareness, preparing to dissect the very heart of the denial mechanism. The depths of the maelstrom are cold, but it is in the crushing pressure of the abyss, that we can finally hear the faint, relentless drumming beneath the floorboards of our own consciousness. This is the sound of the heart dilator, the telltale organ of awareness that insists on beating its rhythm of truth, even when every impulse cries out for silence. We arrive now at the very core of the denial mechanism, examining how the world manages to bury its deepest truths, and why the sensitive soul pays such a grievous price for unearthing them. The central tragedy lies in the human capacity for selective perception. The world does not bury truth by accident. It does so through intricate psychological engineering, both deliberate and unconscious. Consider the monumental efforts expended in ignoring entropy. Everything. Magnificent decays, beauty fades, empires crumble. Even the most passionate love affair succumbs eventually to time or indifference. Yet, the majority chooses to live as if the moment is eternal, investing colossal hope and identity into structures physical, emotional, or institutional that possess an undeniable expiry date. The discerning eye cannot sustain this illusion. It sees the microscopic cracks in the foundation of the skyscraper, the pale, almost invisible rot in the soul of the beloved, the faint dust of dissolution settling on the freshest memory. This persistent clarity about inevitable decay leads to a deep, agonizing friction with the surrounding world, while others celebrate ephemeral triumphs, promotion. A successful holiday, a fleeting political victory this year cannot decouple these moments from the looming shadow of their ultimate insignificance. The celebration rings hollow. The triumph is merely a delay of the inevitable accounting. The pain becomes a constant, low-frequency hum. The awareness that joy is merely a temporary, expensive loan taken out against an enormous, inescapable debt of sadness. And here, in this suffocating closeness to the beating, persistent heart of reality, I must pause, dear spectator. If you find yourself nodding, if these subterranean streams of thought resonate with the deep, often suppressed melancholia that defines genuine reflection, if you feel, even momentarily, the chill of recognizing the truths, I assume then perhaps you too are a refugee from the blinding light of conventional comfort. If this macabre clarity holds a hypnotic grip on your attention, if you feel the necessary, terrifying weight of this journey, then I invite you to solidify your presence here. Mark your appreciation for this venture into the gloom, and bind yourself to this channel. For those who seek the authentic horror and beauty hidden beneath the pleasant facade, the shadows always hold deeper secrets. Having momentarily acknowledged our shared predicament, we return to the grave. The world also buries the consequences of its actions. Environmental catastrophe, historical atrocities, systemic injustices, these are not forgotten. They are actively, aggressively recontextualized and moved to the dusty, inaccessible cellar of the collective mind. The seer, however, is haunted by the continuity of suffering. They see the spectral chains linking the past to the present, understanding that the horrors of yesterday are not resolved, but merely masked by new, equally fragile curtains of prosperity. This is the burden of ethical sight, the impossibility of innocence in a world built on compounded transgressions. The heart beats faster now, a testament to the persistent, inescapable knowledge of universal guilt. The persistent rhythm of the telltale heart has led us into the deep chamber of the enigma de agony, paradox, that the more clearly one sees the world, the less intelligible it becomes. We confront now the uncomfortable truth. The greatest things the world tries to bury are not merely unpleasant facts, but the fundamental incoherence of existence itself, forcing the discerning mind to grapple with truths that actively destroy the concept of easy meaning. The grand enigma is often disguised as purpose. Society attempts to bury the profound purposelessness of the cosmic mechanism by endlessly inventing grand narratives. Destiny, salvation, historical inevitability. These narratives serve as scaffolding, preventing the individual from gazing into the dizzying void of random chance. The one who sees the buried reality recognizes these narratives as elegant, necessary fictions, but fictions nonetheless. They perceive the universe not as a grand, purposeful clockwork, but as a vast, indifferent ocean where human sails catch only temporary, capricious winds. The pain here is acute because it dismantles the foundation of hope. Hope, for the unseeing, is the belief in a preordained, beneficial outcome. For the seer, hope is often replaced by a stark, stoic endurance, a commitment to navigating the absurd with integrity, even knowing that integrity will yield no cosmic reward. This challenging perception is dismissed by the comfortable masses as cynicism or morbidity, but it is, in fact, a higher, more demanding form of honesty. It is the refusal to accept the intellectual bribe of easy comfort. We must also explore the buried enigma of identity. The world assures the individual that they are a stable, continuous entity, a coherent self. Yet, the analytical gaze reveals identity to be a constellation of momentary impressions, a composite sketch, constantly being edited by memory, circumstance, and delusion. The most destabilizing truth, buried by routine, is the terrifying liquidity of the self. Who are we, truly, when the masks fall, when the audience departs, and only the raw, transient mechanism of thought remains? The pain of clarity is the terrifying recognition that the self is the greatest illusion of all, a grand theater built upon unstable ego, threatening to dissolve at any moment under the relentless pressure of scrutiny. This internal disintegration reflects the external world's ultimate enigma, the coexistence of overwhelming beauty and appalling horror. The world tries to separate these. To it buries the suffering beneath the joy, the corpse beneath the flower, but the observer sees them as inseparable elements of the same sublime, terrifying tapestry. The flower's beauty is contingent upon the rot that feeds it. The moment of highest human connection is inherently laced with the promise of future separation and grief. To see this terrifying unity is to understand existence as a perfect, grotesque piece of art. It is in this realization, where the aesthetic merges with the abyss, that the tension of our narrative reaches its height, preparing us for the inevitable, cold illumination of our climax. We stand now at the precipice, where the winds of unwelcome knowledge whip into a tempest. This is the ultimate confrontation with the buried truth, the chilling synthesis of all that has been observed. The point of highest pain is the realization that the world does not merely bury truth. It weaponizes the lack of vision, turning blindness into a prerequisite for participation in its game. The most profound, most agonizing pain for the seer is the recognition that their clarity is not a source of power, but a source of exile. The masseuse, terrified of the cold light of reality, actively punish those who insist on illuminating the shadows. They build walls of derision, silence, and misunderstanding around the perceptive soul. This persecution is subtle but pervasive. The constant dismissal of complex thought as negativity, the branding of deep reflection as morbid depression, the insistence that anything that shatters the comfort of the commonplace is somehow deficient or ill. The crow's climax is not merely seeing the decay, it is hearing the eternal, maddening repetition of the single word, nevermore. Nevermore will you find true communion with the unseen. Nevermore will you know the simple, blissful comfort of unexamined existence. The sight, once acquired, is permanent, irreversible, and entirely solitary. But within this isolation, within this crystalline vision of the world's grotesque, buried machinery, a strange, terrible beauty is forged. The agony of clarity is, paradoxically, the wellspring of true depth. Only by recognizing the absolute, uncompromising finitude of everything can one truly appreciate the fleeting, furious brilliance of the human struggle against the void. The seer understands that the most profound acts of creation, philosophy, genuine, love are not expressions of hope in eternity, but defiant, magnificent gestures of rebellion against the inevitability of nothingness. They are the screams of the conscious mind against the silence of the universe. We reach the zenith of this pain when we finally embrace the most disturbing very fact, that the burden of sight is not a curse imposed by an external entity, but the natural, chilling consequence of heightened consciousness itself. The ability to see the world's buried truths is inseparable from the capacity to feel deeply, to connect complexities, and to understand the architecture of suffering. The pain is the evidence of the depth of your own soul. The more intensely you suffer the knowledge of the world's delusions, the more profoundly you are alive to the authentic, albeit macabre nature of reality. The final, blinding flash of this clarity illuminates the necessity of the burial. If we did not constantly enter our fears, our failures, and our ultimate doom, human effort would cease. Therefore, the perceptive soul is the necessary sacrifice to one who pays the price of existential terror, so that the rest of humanity can continue its necessary, if diluted, labor. It is a lonely, cold honor, but an honor nonetheless. We now turn from the blinding glare of this realization to seek the enduring message, the legacy forged in the heat of this agonizing sight. The tempest recedes, leaving behind the stark, cold clarity of the dawn after the storm. We have traversed the valleys of denial and scaled the peak of existential dread. Now, in the lingering chill of the mensegum final, we must crystallize the meaning of this immense, persistent pain of seeing what the world tries to bury. What, then, is the legacy of the perceptive soul? It is not happiness, for that requires a degree of blindness. It is not universal acceptance, for clarity is inherently isolating. The legacy is depth, the pain we have meticulously dissected, the agony of knowing the hypocrisy, the decay, the absurdity, and the ultimate futilities, the fertilizer for the profound, the authentic, and the enduring. Those who cannot bear to face the truths buried by society are those who remain superficial, reacting only to the surface flickerings of existence. The seer, however, lives in the rich, dark soil of reality. The philosophical conclusion is this: to see the buried truth is to acquire the only truly valuable currency, the unvarnished reality of existence. This currency buys no comfort, but it purchases absolute intellectual and emotional sovereignty. You are no longer governed by the fictions necessary for the comfort of the herd. You are free from the terror of surprise, for you have already charted the geography of disaster. This pain, this solitude, this burdensome clarity is the price of genuine liberation. Do not mistake this conclusion for a call to despair. Despair is merely the failure to find comfort. True sight leads to something far more stoic and powerful. Acceptance of the inevitable dissolution, acceptance of human frailty, acceptance of the universe is indifference. And from this acceptance springs a unique, dark form of resilience. To endure the reality that breaks others is the ultimate triumph of consciousness. Therefore, embrace the perpetual ache of unwelcome sight. Honor the solitude that clarity imposes, for you are the living monument to the things that others must destroy to survive. You are the custodian of the honest narrative. If this journey through the mausoleums of collective denial has fortified your resolve, if it has deepened the shadows in your own mind, granting them a terrible, beautiful structure, if you feel compelled now to seek out the other voices that whisper truths into the great, indifferent void, then let your presence be felt. Seek out our other contemplations on the nature of terror, beauty, and the profound, inescapable darkness that defines the human experience. Share this testament with those few you believe capable of bearing its weight. Do not allow this hard-won clarity to dissipate into the comfortable light. The world insists on burying the dead beneath 7 feet of earth, hoping silence will follow. But the perceptive soul knows that the truest ghosts are not the ones who rise from the grave, but the ones we consciously push back into it, day after agonizing day. And your curse, your magnificent, terrible gift, is the certainty that, even when muffled by dirt and denial, you can still hear them scream.